So this is a bit weird. I don't do readings very often, and last time I did it was at a kind of poetry event where we were kind of like the sweary prose people, and it was really awkward. So hopefully this will be less awkward than that. Yeah, sorry for throwing the timings a little bit and absconding. What I'm going to do is try and read two stories, if I can fit them in. And it was kind of, I kind of feel like I need to explain what these stories are coming from, because what I did was I had the idea that I was going to rewrite some folk tales and things like that, and just try and sort of use them as a starting point for writing fiction. And I was basically going to do like some Greek myths and legends or whatever, and I was studying for my masters, and I was reading a guy called James Scott. And what Scott's really into is this kind of idea of studying kind of ways that people resist, when to resist openly means you get completely fucked, essentially. So what he did was he went out to like these kind of peasant societies where, you know, if you protested or whatever, you just basically get kicked off your land and that kind of stuff, and sort of look at how people kind of deal with those situations and try and sort of better themselves and try and better their situation. And there was a chapter in a book where he was talking about kind of trickster tales and kind of folk tales, you know, coming from that kind of tradition, and particularly in North America, where it was kind of talking about, you know, kind of the sort of stories that the slaves would tell and things like that. And from that, it was kind of talking about Brer Rabbit and all that kind of thing. So I went and had a look at that stuff, and it's really interesting if you look at it, and it's a bit icky, to be honest, because you've got this kind of, it's by a guy called Joel Chandler Harris, and you can go online and you can read it. And what he did was he wrote down these kind of folk tales, and he serialised them, and they were massive, and it was kind of a bit, you know, sort of like Harry Potter scale, you know, kind of serialisation. People loved it and all that kind of stuff. But what he did was he essentially wrote these stories down in the voices of, you know, kind of southern black freed slaves. So the kind of dialects there, and it's all a bit kind of weird and icky, and you kind of read it now and you're a bit like, it's 120 years on, and it makes you a bit uncomfortable. So what I did was I took some of those stories and I kind of, you know, kind of just basically used them as a starting point for plots of what I'm doing. But I just wanted to flag that because I didn't want it to be this kind of like, look at these fucking stories I've made up, aren't they brilliant? Because they're kind of not my stories, even though they are. But also, I kind of like to flag that there's something really kind of problematic about that makes me feel kind of weird, which is probably why I've never done anything with them, because I sort of look at them and go, I kind of stole that, and I should probably acknowledge that, but not. The other thing I want to say is anyone who's interested in that stuff should go read James Scott, because he's fucking brilliant. I did a book called 2 Cheers for Anarchism, which is not an academic text, it's kind of like him just writing fragments. And it's just a random thoughts really, so you can kind of just get bits and pieces out of it and take those thoughts, and you know, some of them are sensible and some of them are not. But one that really sticks with me is he talks about kind of like this kind of exercise thing for anarchists, where at some point people might be asked to break like serious laws, and might be asked to break like serious rules because they're asked to do something fucked up. And how are you going to do that if you spend your entire life being obedient? So what he says is every day people should break a rule which has no meaning, which you think is, you know, is kind of maybe a bit silly. And he talks about kind of his experiences of jaywalking and things like that. These kind of rules where, you know, no one gets really harmed, but you're not really supposed to do it. And this kind of idea that's kind of practice. So if anyone, even if my stories are rubbish, take that forward with you, and maybe you know, if that's something you're interested in, then Google James C. Scott and find some more interesting stuff. So I'm going to start now because I've talked a lot of bollocks for a long time. So these are some stories that I have stolen, basically. Okay, so yeah, February. I wake up for the first time in years in my old bedroom, in a single bed, with walls thankfully bare of my teenage posters. You can see where my parents have peeled them off recently, little grease patches where blue tack is stained the wallpaper and the occasional rip where it's become fused with a shiny picture of some pop star or another. I get dressed in some old clothes, put my hair up in a way to fit under the cap, or at least out of my eyes. And neck of tea my mum has left outside my door without comment. I remember the electrics aren't great, so I do one last sweep of the room, unplugging everything before I leave. As I do so, I spot what looks like a huge ball of black fluff on the floor next to my bed. I bend down and pick it up, expecting it to be some ancient lint off the bed sheets or something. It crunches between my fingers. I look down and see a bumblebee, huge and mummified. I drop it in disgust, panicking at the possibility of being stung, then pick it up again with tissue and drop it down the loo and flush. It floats on the surface, threatening to never go away. March. The job is pretty routine. Basically, it goes something like this. I clock in and go to the storage cupboard. It's full of damaged mops, the kind where the heads are rotting away so that when you use them, the string comes off in clumps or you end up scrubbing the floor with a metal fitting. I fill in a bucket with bleach and warm water, grab a few wet floor signs which I rest on a mop squeezer that clips to the top of the bucket and push it on probably broken wheels to where I'm meant to clean. Then I do an increasingly half-assed job using increasingly half-assed equipment. I see a few other cleaners, all of whom dislike me for reasons I think are related to how I got the job, but who fucking knows. Most cleaners seem to have functioning equipment, but I'm never sure they get it. There's never anything new when I clock in. I do my hours. I do enough not to get fired. I do little enough to earn some hard looks from other cleaners and occasional hard work from my supervisor. Every day, Mum silently leaves me a cup of tea outside my door. Every day I think that deadbeat was a sign. April. I catch the end of what seems to be an impromptu team meeting as I clock off my shift. A team meeting I was not invited to. My supervisor takes me to one side in an accent which probably once Scottish tells me that I'm not pulling my weight. I shrug and tell her that I'm doing my best, which we both know is a lie, and the equipment's broken, which isn't a lie. She takes neither point on board. Instead she points to Jean, an older lady with the eyes of a buzzard. I'm told in no uncertain terms that I need to clean more rooms than Jean tomorrow, and my 0-hour contract's become a 0 hours ever again contract. Jean, who's been doing the job so long she seems used to her mop handle. Jean, whose mop looks suspiciously new and whose bucket actually goes straight and doesn't threaten to spill at every opportunity. I think of that bumblebee swirling forever around the toilet bowl. I resist the urge to hand in my notice and decide instead to loiter around after my shift is done. I quietly follow Jean down the corridor, expecting her to put her equipment away in the store cupboard. Instead she just tips the water away and trundles off with a bucket and mop. I wonder for a moment she's going to take it home with her, if the company is so tight they make the other cleaners buy their own gear. But then I see her take a left into an empty room. She pushes 2 tables together and using a plastic chair as a kind of step, climbs up on them. She then reaches up and removes first one roof tile and then another. I watch dumbfounded as I see her hide the equipment in the ceiling space. The next morning, we're on the same shift of course. I surprise my mum by leaving the house early. The kettle is still boiling as I slam the front door. I beat Jean into work, but I don't clock in. I go straight to the room, shut the door and climb on the table so Jean hasn't even bothered to move back. I carefully move the tiles and reach up and pull out the equipment. A pair of scissors sorts out the mop head, then I smack the wheels on the bucket with the heel of my shoe until they're as bent as the ones in the store cupboard. When Jean arrives, the supervisor tells us how it is. I'm to do my job properly for once and make sure there are no smears, and she sets me a day's work which she knows I'll find hard to do. She sets Jean the same amount of work, but of course that level of work is a lot more reasonable with decent gear. I go straight to the storeroom. I grab the least broken of the broken rocks, the least bent of the buckets, and fill it with bleach and water. Jean is nowhere to be seen. When I leave to start the cleaning, the supervisor gives me a hard knowing look. I could just quit there and then of course, but I don't. I want to make a point. So I do my shift and do it better and quicker than Jean does because she isn't used to the same busted equipment I am. On the way out, I make a point of asking how I'd done and get another hard look which I return with a grin. I smile at Jean too, scraping away some ingrained gum with a button off. I don't come back. It might be interesting to know that actually, like, I've actually heard of people buying and cleaning equipment in my store as well. So that actually happens in some places, which is kind of a bit horrifying if you have to go in the hospital for something there, really. Yeah. So have I got time to do another story?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to do one more. Okay. We make it halfway up before we have to stop and lie down. It's sweat pouring off us both, even though it's a cool autumn day and I think I might throw up. I haven't had a stitch this bad since doing cross-country 30 years ago. You don't look much better either. I know that you're forcing a neutral look on your pink piggy face out of some misguided attempt to look manly. We've not made it anywhere near to the memorial to that war poet yet. It's a few hundred metres up, although there's the sound of people laughing echoing down the hillside to us. I've planned smoking for a week and I almost bugger it up because I've gotten a few extra pounds over the years. When my head stops throbbing, I tell you that I know. You start to deny it, of course, but it's not like you can go anywhere with that. We're stuck halfway up a hill on the South Downs. You can't exactly walk off in a huff, which is the point. You can't even scream at me about it because the kids up by the memorial will hear. You start with a what the fuck, but I tell you to shut up. I know that you know I know because you were never that much use around computers. I tell you that you left your internet banking logged in and instead of closing the browser when you went to the loo, you just minimised it. I checked my email when you were having a pee and there it was. That part's the truth. Not for the first time recently, I swallow sick. I'll tell you that I was mad at you for a bit, not because you were stealing the money, but because you hadn't told me about it. You just tried to flush your books and skimmed off stupid amounts into your account. I'll tell you to shut up and listen. If I can find out in the time it takes you to convince your prostate to work properly, then so can anyone else who decides to look for it. You need to be smarter and frankly, you don't have the skills. Thank God you never thought to have an affair. I'd known quicker than you could say Ashley Madison. By the time we get to the memorial, it's agreed. Encryption software and a series of Bitcoin accounts. We'll transfer the money you've already stolen into account and get it out of yours. There'll be a trail of sorts, but that can't be hacked. It's better than sitting in your current account. You know I can make this happen. Then we'll work out how to cover our tracks, falsify some invoices or whatever. The department is small and a skeleton admin staff. They'll never notice if we're smart, which I am, except for when it comes to marriage. You sit at your desk in your office, the one you've been using to siphon the money from. I'm not there, of course, but I don't need to be. I can imagine your coffee breath and linen slacks, just fine, your patchouli reek and that gut resting up against the cheap table. I know what you're like after all these years. What you have to do is open the email I sent you and click the link. It's titled Dust. The link will install the first part of the encryption software. I've told you that you can't just go ahead and install it in one go because it will set off alarm bells with the IT people. That part isn't the whole truth. It's not much of the truth at all, actually. So you do this. I know this because you're on the phone to me, cursing down the airways because you were never very good with computers and you're, ironically enough, worried you'll break something and get caught. The dust icon appears on your desktop and you sound audibly relieved. Next, I'll give you a web address. I'll tell you that the second part of the encryption software is web-based. I'll tell you the idea is this. You open the site and run the Dust program. This will kickstart the RAIN program, which, assuming your account is open in another window, will allow secret encrypted exchange of funds for bitcoins, and then instantly and invisibly filter these through accounts into other countries until the trail is so long and confusing no one will know where the money is or where it came from except for us. Pretty much none of what I tell you is true, but you are good at catching me out, thankfully, as I am you. When I got H to set up the program for me, this is the story he told me to use as colour. I asked him how factual it was and he laughed in my face and asked if that mattered. I figured given your degree of expertise, it didn't, and we both agreed I could probably tell you anything. I hang up abruptly when you tell me you click OK and turn off my phone. Dust and rain make mud. Electronic devices tend not to work so well clogged up with mud, which is why your computer throws up like that. I thought that was too obvious a joke, but you didn't notice it, so what do I know? H thought was poetic. Less poetic was the gift of a huge frogging cock jerkily fucking your eye socket. But I give H his due, he has some skills with rocks off paint. Of course, the money never went into any Bitcoin accounts. It stayed in yours, a glaring electronic trail you laid. I can't speak anymore. A glaring electronic trail you laid, lit up like a beacon. I don't think it took the police any longer than it did me to work out what he'd done, particularly given the email I sent him explaining it from a fake account. All's well that ends well. I just wish I could have seen the look on your face when, instead of being mildly rich, you were staring in horror at your frozen monitor. But I can't have everything.
Yeah!